A very good evening, and welcome to the mBBC's coverage of the Single Market Referendum. Tonight, we will be reporting on polling on all 51 voting constituencies to determine the people's verdict on the British membership of the Single Market. We will be inviting guests from all spheres of the political spectrum to join us in the studio this evening, and anyone and everyone will be welcome to wait in the Broadcasting House lobby to join us this evening. So, as we reach out to anyone, even if they haven't arranged to come on us so far, let's talk about the referendum. Dr. Caesar MD called this referendum to get a mandate for his plans in the House of Commons divided against him. Will the Leave campaign secure that mandate for him, defying the expectations of political pundits and the early polling? Or will the burst of activity from the Remain camp be enough to turn the tide and swing a Remain victory? And what kind of majority will we see for this tumultuous decision? Tonight, we will find out. I'm joined in the studio by former Commons Speaker Indigo Rollo. Good evening.
Evening.
Perhaps you could walk us through the system that will be used this evening. Is this a simple majority or is it more complicated?
Simple majority. So it is using every constituency in the United Kingdom plus, but it doesn't matter having a majority of constituencies. All you need is a majority of votes. It's a simple vote. The most vote will win.
And what are your thoughts on MPs potentially finding themselves at odds with their constituents?
Well, it's I don't think it's too important of an issue because people will always vote for their party as well as for their MP. Issues in some constituencies, as far as I'm aware.
Okay. Well, hopefully this evening we should have an interesting selection of guests, and we're expecting our first result shortly, which we predict will be Gibraltar. Gibraltar, of course, being one of the only British overseas territories to be voting in this referendum. What are your thoughts on Gibraltar specifically, Rollo?
Well, very, very small population. So we're expecting it to remain in the single market, but with only a couple of thousand votes, sort of 20,000 votes, it's unlikely to significantly affect the actual vote totals. But what it will do potentially is it might votes to leave, and Gibraltar, say, and Scotland and Northern Ireland vote to stay. That will make it less politically easy to leave.
And what if Gibraltar votes to leave?
I'll be looking for the nearest flying pig.
That's terrible cynicism. It will get you nowhere in life. Well, we are, as I say, waiting for our first result, which hopefully shall be coming in shortly. Now, how do you view the campaign so far, Rollo?
It's been a very active campaign. So the Remain campaign made a last-minute push right at the end, which pundits aren't sure how big of an effect it's going to be. It could just be enough to turn the tide.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to come in because Gibraltar has just returned. Gibraltar, as the first constituency return in this referendum, has voted to remain with a very strong majority. A turnout of 88% and showing an extremely strong majority for Remain in Gibraltar. Although this perhaps isn't a greatly surprising result. Do you think this could perhaps be a bellwether?
I think it's too early to tell. Honestly, what was the constituency that we waited for the previous referendum? I think until we see sort of these like those in the Midlands, we're not going to be able to tell which way the wind is blowing.
So do you think the Midlands will be the crucial battleground this evening?
Quite possibly, yes.
I see. Perhaps we could invite on some guests this evening to discuss just the results so far with us, or result.
So with me in the studio, I have got Zukov, who was with us on the mBBC Question Time. Zukov, hello.
Good evening, Zukov.
Good evening. Am I on?
Yes, you are. How are you this evening?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm feeling refreshed after that victory in Gibraltar. I thought it would be closer than that simply because the last minute push by the Leave campaign was, I believe, in Gibraltar where they had three party leaders, I believe, campaign in there for Leave. So I thought it was going to be closer. I thought it was going to be around 55-64 win for us. So I'm happy. I'm happy with it so far.
Do you think this could be a actually no, I'm going to have to stop myself there because we've just had the results from Tyne and Wear. Tyne and Wear has voted to leave. This is a constituency, saw very heavy campaigning from Trev, and has returned a very strong Leave result. We're seeing a 76% vote in favour of Leave, and a constituency turnout of 73%. So perhaps you're feeling less optimistic now.
I felt I was feeling pretty I was feeling pretty optimistic about Gibraltar. I never stated that the other results wouldn't be as optimistic. I thought Gibraltar was going to be closer. Tyne and Wear obviously is a bit of a disappointment, but we will continue to go on. This is very early, and there are still many more votes to be counted.
And of course, Tyne and Wear currently held by the Greens as an MPC. Do you see this as perhaps a recurring theme throughout Green seats?
I think first of all we have to recognize this is a nonpartisan referendum. So I think the idea that Greens specifically are going to be hurt by this. I think if Greens can target and adjust their message, I think we can do quite well. With renewed promises, if our seats in general tend to vote in this election, in this referendum to leave, then we can adjust our message adequately to reflect our constituents. But yeah, I don't see this as a particularly worrying sign for Greens because we obviously had a lot of members go from support Leave. I believe Adam was a really influential member of the Greens who was supporting Leave, and we had a lot of other members who supported Leave. So I think we could possibly adjust our message to reflect that.
Well, how come Trev did leave in the end? Because is the Green Party divided on the issue?
I would say no. Here's the thing. I said specifically there are members that crossed over, but I'm not saying Green specifically is. Of course, there are going to be members in every party that support the other side in this referendum. This just displays the nonpartisanship of this referendum because this isn't about parties. It's about which decision is right for the economic and political future for Britain, and I think that's what we have to focus on.
We're in the studio now. We have Trev himself. Trev, good evening.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, especially given the last result.
Yes, Trev, you're probably feeling quite smug this evening.
That's an understatement, considering that I was pretty much the only one.
And we appear to be having some slight technical difficulties, Trev. Oh, no, he's back.
Really over the moon. As I was saying.
Yeah, I think we've got little gremlins on the line there, Trev, but I think we got the gist of it. Earlier we heard Indigo comment that perhaps the bellwethers for this would be the Midlands. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think that Midlands, it was always going to be up in the air because you think you've got your Lib Dem seats and you've got your Tory seats, and you even got a little bit of a Green seat towards the bottom end. But it's a real mix, and if I'm honest, I did a bit of campaigning in Birmingham. I think a lot of people were quite positive about the Leave campaign, about the message they portrayed, and they saw Remain as a campaign that was rather, how did you put it, impersonal.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there because we have our next result that's just come in from Manchester North. Manchester North has voted to remain in the single market with a less impressive majority than the previous two results at 59.6% and 61% constituency turnout.
I think that's a lot more indicative of what the result will probably end up being. A bit significantly tighter than what would be the case in the first two constituencies.
Yeah, I agree.
And what do you think of the low turnout in Manchester North?
Who?
Either of you.
Oh,
This is a 61% turnout. It's dropped a bit, and a more narrow majority here.
I think more than anything, it's either a case of apathy or apathy. Obviously, Manchester, I believe, is a Remain seat. Perhaps that's indicative of the fact that the Remain campaign probably didn't resonate their message as much with a wider pool of voters, but the voters who did vote clearly agree with what they had to say.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but the results are pouring in here. We have another result in North London. North London has voted to remain in the single market with a majority, no, sorry, I apologise, with a Remain vote of 57% and a turnout of 59%. So yes, we're starting to see a slight pickup on the Remain size, but they haven't quite closed the gap so far with the Leave campaign, which is a single constituency victory in Tyne and Wear, has pushed them ahead still.
yeah.
Yes, Tracy's done in an hour. This is very fast paced.
Yeah, this is. It's interesting so far. I am a bit worried. Could I speak?
Yeah,
Sorry.
go on.
Yeah. These results are interesting so far. I'm still hopeful that the final result will be headed towards the Remain camp's direction. But once again, anything can happen, and these results aren't the most optimal I would have hoped for. Especially with the turnout percentages, I would have been hoping for higher. But once again, people have delivered. And we'll see at the end of the night. Still early days.
And so, Zukov, where have you been mostly campaigning in this referendum?
I have actually been campaigning a lot in Scotland, so I will wait for the results there, particularly Lothian and Fife. But I've also campaigned a bit in Manchester too.
And if
can I just interject here, or you?
Yeah, do please go on.
I was going to make a point that a lot of Remain campaigners have been going in Scotland, particularly from the so-called Celtic coalition, and I think that might impact on their final outcome because it's going to result in probably a really, really strong result in Scotland, but perhaps not in the Greens traditional area where they've done well of the north, as we're already seeing tonight. Tyne and Wear has already gone Leave, and that's pushed the result ahead, perhaps. Perhaps the campaigning in Scotland will weaken the Remain campaign.
Quite possibly, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut in again because another return has come in. Going up to Scotland, in Clydeside, a Remain victory has come in, and that has pushed the Remain campaign into the Leave with a majority of 83,000 votes, approximately. So yes, Remain has begun to take the lead. Whether we'll see this play out later on is an interesting question, but we're seeing Remain in first place currently.
Could be that could be the case that Trev's in his own constituency is what made the vote swing so dramatically. So
at least I know I'm loved.
Well, I don't think you have to worry about the next general election.
All right. Yeah. I just think this is indicative. The Remain campaign has always been quite strong in Scotland, in my view, and I hope that these results will continue to favor the Remain campaign as they seem to have for this particular constituency. So yeah, I'm a bit hopeful after this result, but yeah.
Brilliant.
Trev, if you,
I'm gonna say, sorry.
Trev, if you find that as a whole the nation votes to remain, of course with your constituency voting to leave, who do you side with?
Well, I'll always side with my constituents. First and foremost, if they vote to leave, then I'm going to vote to leave at the end of the day.
And would the same have been true if they had voted to remain?
It would have been. Well, yes, it would have been, because I think the thing is, ultimately, while I may campaign for leave, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to my constituents, and I represent them. I've got to represent their views, and in spite of my personal principles, I've got to put them first.
And what would you say to the argument that you are there not to be a delegate, but to be a representative, and that if they don't like your views, they should dismiss you?
Yes, but at the same time, I feel that they've elected me to fulfil a particular mandate. I feel that if there is a referendum result like that, obviously there hasn't been, so I won't need to worry about it on that front, and I can still stick with my principles and vote as they wanted me to. But at the end of the day, I'm elected to serve that community, and I've got to be wary of that community's needs and demands,
It might be
as well as
very
sticking to my own principles.
very interesting if we see a narrow result where are in favour of leave, but a majority of the constituencies are in favour of remain. That might be tricky for some MPs to implement. So I want to say thank you very much to Zukov for joining us in the studio.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zukov. And before you go, I'd like to get your live reaction with another constituency. South West London has returned a Remain victory. This is pushing Remain seriously into the lead with a majority of 200,000 currently.
All right.
If you can give me your 5-second reaction.
I'm hopeful, and I'm thankful to the people of London for giving us southeast of that constituency for giving us their mandate for remaining in the single market.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We're joined now in the studio by Toast in Russian. Toast in Russian, welcome.
Sorry, did you ask if we only got the last half of that sentence as I was heard
We
it
said
into the
welcome.
recording studio?
I was just saying
hello.
hello. We're happy
Sorry,
to have you here.
hello. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. It's excellent to be here.
Now, at the risk of being rude, I'm going to bring in Trev because he's going to have to leave us shortly. So, Trev, what are your thoughts so far on this, with 5 constituencies against you and 1 with you?
Well, I think the Remain heartlands have been declared early, and if I'm honest, I'm not going to make any bold predictions about Remain winning because I still think that Leave have done enough. I still think I've done enough. I still think the Pint Van, the Unlock Britain campaign resonate with voters across the nation, not just in Remain heartland. And I think that that's going to be the prevailing thought at the end of the day. And with that, I'll let you go, and I enjoy the rest of your evening.
It's the Pint Van what won it.
So we're
There you
now,
go.
Good evening,
now-
Toast in Russian.
Hello, it's fantastic to be here. Would be probably a bit better if the map was coloured a bit more blue, but unfortunately it's not. That's just the way she goes.
Well, we may be able to make you feel a little better, as we say Buckinghamshire has voted to leave with a majority of with a vote of 71% in favour of leave. This has put a serious dent in the lead the Leave camp had secured, with with the Leave camp now falling to a majority of 48,000.
just going to bring into the studio now Snapcrackle. Hello.
Hello, Snapcrackle.
Can you hear us?
No, doesn't look like he's there. We've lost Snapcrackle. He's gone into the ether.
Well, we still
Most
have
certainly.
But yes, so we've now seen
I'm
a
still
second constituency turn blue. Toast, are you feeling a little outnumbered?
I am. It's not. It's. But I was before Buckinghamshire. But it brought I think it's brought us back as a I think it's brought Leave back in terms of total votes. It's going to be interesting though, depending on if the country votes overwhelmingly to Leave will stay, and then the constituencies are overwhelmingly the other way. That will be a most certainly interesting kind of debate that happens in the House.
And I'll ask you the question that I asked Trev before he left us, which is, if your constituency votes to leave and the country votes to remain, which side do you pick?
I think I'll vote the way of the country. I've said long and hard in the House and in speeches and in questions, and like I said in questions to the Prime Minister, I will be voting the way the country goes, no matter which way that is.
But don't you see your ultimate duty to represent your constituents' views rather than the views of the rest of the country? After all, you're not a national MP, are you? You're a constituency MP.
No, I am a constituency MP, that's right. And I believe that whilst you are partially correct in that I should represent my constituency, I feel that overall, all members should represent the country in an election such as this. Because it wouldn't be particularly... If all members represented their constituencies and constituencies had the majority, but a minority in votes, I don't think that wouldn't represent the referendum well. And then, even further, you don't want a rotten borough situation occurring.
Okay, I can now interrupt to tell us that we have another return. Leeds and Wakefield has voted to leave with a leave vote of 60%. This has put Leave back in the lead. Leave have secured their leading place with a narrow majority of 42,000.
Ah, that's excellent. The good people of Leeds and Wakefield know they know the right way for Britain. It's excellent.
We should be joined in the studio now by Snapcrackle. Hopefully the technology is working.
Snapcrackle, are you with us? Nope. No, we've lost him. It's a hard life, isn't it?
Hello, can you hear us?
Hello, we can hear your typing. We can't hear you though. I think Will Shakespeare might be trying to communicate in Morse code.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, I thought I was going to have to get out the little Morse code buzzer.
I'm not quite that talented, I'm afraid.
I know S, O, and E, so
more than me.
3 out of 26 isn't bad.
It's a start.
Well, E is just. So I'm not sure if that counts.
This isn't the way I expected this result live stream to go.
Talk about Morse code.
So Leeds and Wakefield has voted by a fairly decent margin, 60.5% to leave. What do you make of that?
I mean, the turnout figures are extremely interesting in some of these constituencies. We've got it's varying quite dramatically. I was quite surprised by the low turnout in Leeds and Wakefield. It was only 55%. And I think ultimately, turnout is going to be quite critical in the way this swings, I think.
Well, perhaps we can see the turnout for Northamptonshire and Rutland, which has just come in with a vote to leave. So we see Northamptonshire and Rutland has now voted to leave with a leave vote of 57%. We're seeing quite a theme of quite narrow leave votes now, with the last one being 60%. But still. And here we're seeing constituency turnout for 61%. So coming back to the point you were saying, if there's a low turnout, who does it favour?
Well, it's interesting. It seems to be sort of patchy across the country, because there was a sort of a low turnout in Leeds and Wakefield, but there was a slightly higher turnout in Clydeside, but also a low turnout in Manchester. So it seems to be just sort of a patchwork quilt of different turnout figures. And it'll be interesting to see when it's all knitted together which side has the bigger turnouts in their areas. Because it seems to be that the actual margins between Leave and Remain aren't particularly tight, but it's the turnout figures that are varying dramatically.
Because, of course, we saw in the EU referendum predictions that a low turnout would favour Remain. So would you... Oh, I apologise, but would favour Leave, the other one. So you think this time it could be perhaps not favouring either side, a poor turnout?
I think it's too early to tell at this point. I think it's sort of all over the place, and I think that we're yet to see a sort of a steady pattern across the country. And
could you see hello, we just had a little bit of graphical error there. Just ignore that. So could we perhaps see a? Oh, I've lost my train of thought now. Don't just hate it when that's happened. It's just gone.
Yeah.
So yes, Toast. You haven't said much.
No, I haven't. I was letting the man of the hour speak. But no, this map's looking more and more blue as we get on, and I like that. It's good to see. I think we saw good campaigning from Remain in the devolved assemblies. Well, not assemblies. I've had trouble with calling them assemblies recently with the devolved administration in the devolved areas, and then like the main London, because London's particularly communist. But okay, everywhere else is looking blue. But I can't make an overall prediction.
Okay, so if I can now come in, we had Manchester City and South has voted to remain. So a brief buggy flash there as someone was trying to type in the numbers in BBC HQ and they accidentally pressed enter. Luckily, they typed in the right numbers for remain, so it didn't get all confusing there. But we can see here that remain has won in Manchester City and South, forming a nice sort of yellow blob in that area. It's sort of joined up. It looks very pretty. So overall, this is a question to anyone who'd like it. Where do you see voting leave and where do you see voting remain in this, on the whole?
I think, like I said earlier, devolved areas will vote to remain, and areas that have been hit hard by the EU, such as most places which focus on fishing as one of their key key industries who've had their waters ravaged by the EU, will want to leave, I think. So in less urban areas. And of course London's going to be a pocket of remain because London's an interesting place politically.
You talk about fishing, but couldn't the argument be made that since the common fisheries policy is not a part of the EEA, indeed that's generally believed to be the motivation for Norway not properly joining the EU, couldn't the argument be made that it would service fishermen better to be outside of the common fisheries policy but within the single market to have a guarantee of trade access on no tariff terms?
Well, if you talk about trading, we can get it. As we said in question time and all throughout this campaign, we can get a trade deal. It will happen if we leave the single market, which it's too early to call. Secondly, the British waters have been ravaged by the EU fisheries, and I'm not saying it's because they're not from Britain. I'm saying because there's just too many people fishing there. It's not particularly good for the fish. And for
If I could come in, I'm sorry, this is a very interesting point, but we do have another result to declare. Hampshire North has voted to leave. We saw briefly in the last results that Manchester City and South had secured a narrow majority for remain, but this has now blown that out of the water, with the leave vote being 112,000 in favour. So we're seeing leave has retaken the driving seat, as it were.
Still a very small margin, though. It could swing back.
This is
You're most certainly correct. It's a retired turnout that we've seen, if I may point that out.
I'm just going to bring into the studio now Snapcrackle again, hopefully, who we hope... Okay, Snapcrackle, can you
Snapcrackle, third time's the charm.
Aha! I can...
Hello?
Yeah, I know, it works. Aha!
You live! We didn't think you were real. We thought you were a Swedish voting bot.
I am actually
I think he is a Swedish voting bot.
I am actually Xcloud now.
Well, he's definitely not a Finnish voting bot because, of course, Finland doesn't really exist.
It's just East Sweden.
Yes, as we all know, in fact, Finland was in fact a conspiracy invented by the Russians and the Japanese. See, the reason they didn't fight in World War II is because they were hashing out a plan in Finland, which is actually ocean, to mine oil and fish.
Going back to Hampshire North.
Actually, if we could go to Humberside, after that little tangent. Humberside has voted to leave with a 67% showing for leave. This has pushed leave further into the lead.
No, I want us to remain.
May I point out briefly that, just looking through the glass, there's a man screaming in the lobby, in the reception area.
Oh dear.
I
thought we had security for this.
I think that's
I think this is normal procedure.
Okay, so if anyone has ever seen the episode of The Thick of It, where they have the radio session, and then they have the media directors outside going in, we sort of have this situation right now. There's a lot of angry people.
I mean, the Thick of It is an accurate depiction of course, how the mBBC operates, as we all know.
Essentially.
In fact, actually, the character of Malcolm Tucker was, of course, based on former Director General Leachy 62.
If I could point out the Humberside, that this must give it like what 300,000 to the to leave.
257,500.
I'm actually quite disappointed that we're seeing now many leave votes. I am proud of my constituency though for voting Remain.
Well, we fought a strong campaign. I don't think we fought a campaign that was strong and was down to earth with people. I don't think you can deny that, because you can't run a campaign like you can't. I'm not making any predictions, but it seemed to me when I was campaigning that Britain was just above the people, was lofty, making speeches. It wasn't actually down. Wasn't actually talking to real people.
Well, this is partly due to the fact that many of our active campaigners were, I just want to say they were classical liberals, and now I think I've heard from many of these classical liberals that they don't want anything to do with the people, and
if I may,
like it's just normal elitism that I don't feel has a place anymore in our country as more and more people can be involved in our great democracy.
So do you feel that the Remain campaign may have had more or less
I feel like we could have done it better. I just feel like we could have done it better. We could have been more down to earth, and we could have made it truly something for Britain. We could have made the single market for us.
How so?
So with all these lofty speeches, we kept hearing all of these people saying, "Oh, our government is going to make this single market work for us," when in reality, it's the British people that make the single market work for them. £11.25, as I recall, isn't that much for most people wanting to remain in the single market. Correct.
Let's
see more specifically what the people of Derbyshire say on the single market. The people of Derbyshire have voted to leave, with a 54.65% voting in favour of leave at a constituency turnout of 54. Quite low turnout we're starting to see here. What are your thoughts on that?
And then turnout has also been a very, very big issue so far in this referendum. I applaud the Leave campaign for getting their voter base active and to give high voter turnouts in the referendum. And I feel, and then when I see the 50s, was it 50? It was low percentage of voter turnout in my own constituency. So to see that, it kind of disheartens me to see all of my constituents not coming out to vote for something that's very important.
Now that we've briefly seen the latest result, can I point out what Snapcrackle said about the what so-called elitism from the classical liberals? Do you not think that's completely goes against what one of the main Leave campaigners, Zukov, said earlier? So Remain campaigner Zukov said earlier, how it's not a party issue, except from the Greens, the Greens say it's not a party issue, but then you're saying it is. So if you'd please like to enlighten the BBC studio, that would be fantastic.
Well, this whole referendum is ideological and very personal to a lot of people. Now, I'm not saying it's only just classical liberals that have been elitist. I'm just saying that it is people.
The whole Remain campaign?
No, not the whole Remain campaign. It is just a select few people that have had higher up positions in our campaign that have had elitist views, and now I've done to the best of my ability to try and convince people that it's not about elitism; it's more about working for the people at this point in time.
Perhaps we could see what the people of East London think of the proposed elitism. East London has voted to leave with a leave vote of 59%, very high constituency turnout of 69%.
That's very high.
It's a very shocking result because we're
That is. I have to commend the people of East London. I didn't think they would do that. So I will be eating my hat this evening.
Now, on that point, Toast, I'd like to be interested to hear your thoughts on how you think Central London would vote. Because on one hand, you could consider that Central London is a very middle-class area, very likely to support the kind of values that Remain is espousing. But at the same time, Central London, of course, is quite significantly politically different. And with the militant workers backing leaving, do you think that will be enough to persuade them?
I would hope so. The militant workers as much as I do not like their utopian ideology, because, well, as I said in the House, but they did a good job on leaving. They did a good job campaigning, and I do hope it swings them. So that'll definitely be interesting.
Yes, and of
But
course,
you know, like I said, I want to put a disclaimer on because I've been pretty confident so far. And I'm only saying that because the map's turning blue. But most of these, we've only had 14 constituencies, so I can't actually make any solid claims about which way it's going to go till much later in the night. So
yes, and of course the Leave is now showing a majority of 386,000, which is quite a significant breakaway. Although, of course, there are many seats to come, so this could swing back away.
I think
Well, looks like Lincolnshire.
guests earlier was mentioning was
Oof.
also the focus of the Remain campaign had been on Scotland, Wales, London, and Northern Ireland, and a lot of the focus of the Leave campaign had been in England. That's that. I mean, if there's a divergent result, that's gonna situation politically. But just to remember, England's population dwarfs the rest of the United Kingdom. So.
Yes. So if I can just come in, we have another result from Lincolnshire. Lincolnshire has voted to Leave with a 78% vote share. This has put Leave in a significant lead, boosting up by almost doubling their previous vote share to 610,000. This is a significant showing for Leave. Leave have cruised into the lead.
I think that the Remain campaign targeted areas that would probably be most effective by leaving the single market areas such as Northern Ireland and Gibraltar. Since they do border EU countries, I feel that they would be most affected by, if they left the single market, they would not be able to move across and work in Republic of Ireland and in Northern Ireland without having to go through very stringent border activities.
I'm going to say thank you to Toast in Russian for joining us in the studio.
Thank you very much. I had a fantastic time. I look forward to driving down to Kent to watch my constituency declare.
Thank you. He's heading back off to Conservative Party headquarters, where
Drive safely, Toast.
we'll be having some interesting conversations. And we have a new guest in the studio joining us.
Goodbye, Toast.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me is the real question.
We can indeed. Good evening, sir. Now, perhaps I could get a live reaction from you, because we have Glamorgan and Gwent returning. Glamorgan and Gwent has voted 82% in favour of remaining. This is a very strong showing in Glamorgan and Gwent.
That's a very much needed.
This has put serious pain to the Leave majority. The Leave majority has dropped from 610,000 to 39,000. This has put a serious knife through butter.
That's what we need right now.
Well, maybe, but it's still
for the Remain campaign. No, but it is still a much-needed victory in Wales to get us up to at least within 100,000 votes of the Leave campaign.
Right, well, a very good evening. Would our new guest care to introduce himself? No, I think we may have lost him.
So Snapcrapple, as I understand it, you're having to go back to your party headquarters.
Yes, very soon actually.
Yes. So I'm. So anyway, I'm gonna thank you for having it. And we're now gonna bring in one who Wales is very close to their heart. So. Can we hear them?
Hello, are you there?
Hello.
Oh, very good evening. Right, we appear to be having some problems with Jakob's line. We can't hear him, unfortunately. So perhaps you can pick up.
Now?
Ah, we can hear you now. Hello.
Hi. There we go.
Well, perhaps you could comment on a result that's just come in. Merseyside has voted to Remain. This has put Remain back in the lead with a majority of 156,000. Wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Troubling. It is quite troubling for the Leave campaign, of course, but I think in the end it'll even out. Just like you said, when Leave had a 39,000 majority, it will even out again in favor of Leave in the end, I think.
Okay. And what do you think of the volatility of the majority either side we've seen so far?
Expected, of course. I mean, some areas will Leave, some areas will Remain, and it will swing by and forth, but in the end we'll see a clear result, and I think that will be Leave.
And I'm interested to hear a point that was raised earlier by Toast in Russian when he was in the studio, which is that he expected the devolved regions to vote to remain. Indeed, what little we've seen of that is true, with the two constituencies we've seen, one in Wales, one in Scotland, respectively, both voting for remain. If it turns out that Wales and Scotland, and perhaps Northern Ireland, vote to remain, does that put strain on the Union if the rest of the country as a whole votes to leave?
Well, it could put a strain on the Union, but only if those regions decide to make a problem out of it. I mean, this is not a regional thing, this is a national thing. We are one country.
Well, yes, but we see a resurgence of nationalism with the SNP managing to secure a seat in Holyrood, and of course the Greens making up the major part of the governing party. So can you see this perhaps particularly in Scotland, where independence is still seriously talked about? Could you see that as perhaps straining the Union?
Ireland, where there's a nationalist first minister.
There's an idiot as a first minister, so it probably will be a problem. But I think that Northern Ireland, for one, will be more sensible when it comes to...
Well, if we could avoid words like idiot, it is pre-watershed.
I'm sorry, special individual.
Okay, I think I better bring in some results to sort of break us up a bit here before we start a fight in the studio. We're seeing Cambridgeshire has voted to leave, 58% in favour of leaving. That has reduced the showing of Remain, although Remain still is holding a majority at 69,000.
69.
So Cambridgeshire, many were expecting to vote Remain, with cities such as Cambridge being very strongly in union.
Yeah, you would expect that.
Yes, but I think Dibber or Huntingdon or Ben's much more likely to vote to leave. So I think voters have managed to, by the arguments.
Okay, perhaps we could bring in Polaris, who hasn't spoken much. Good evening, Polaris.
Good evening.
And what are your thoughts on the results so far?
Well, we can see that in Wales there's a decisive will to remain in the single market, as Wales does have a strong economic ties with the European Union, especially within agriculture.
I see. And coming back to the question we focused earlier on devolved regions perhaps voting differently to, say, England, how do you think that would affect the dynamic of the Union?
Well, as you said before, they would definitely cause some strain due to a disagreement between the regions. Hopefully, it can be resolved peacefully and trouble. However, if the devolved regions do state that they wish to remain in the single market compared to England wishing to leave, it does send a conflicting message of the Union and stay together.
Okay, if I can now bring in our next result, which is Dorset. Dorset has voted to leave at 68.8% in favour and a high constituency turnout. This has removed the lead that Leave had held, with Remain, I apologise, with Leave now showing 96,000 in favour.
Well, that's good.
So yes, we're seeing constituencies beginning to form almost a belt on sort of the east of England and down to the south of England.
I think the east and south of England will become firmly blue, and the rest will just turn yellow.
I'm just going to say thank you to Polaris for joining us, and I'm now going to bring into the studio A123. who I believe is the constituency MP for Dorset. Hello, Eve, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank
Good
you.
evening, Ave.
Hello. So I'm very happy that my constituency has voted to leave, and I'm very happy that it has turned the tide. But question is, how will Scotland vote? Could MG 9000 change the union entirely with this? That's very worrying to me.
And which way do you see this going as a whole?
I hopefully see it going leave, as I want it to, but I do think that the devolved regions will vote to remain.
I see. And particularly in Scotland, do you see that as putting serious possibility of a second independence referendum on the table?
Well, it definitely does see the possibility if the First Minister and his party wish to make it a problem.
Okay, well, let's see what the people of Leicestershire think. The
Okay.
people of Leicestershire have voted to leave with a 56% majority. We're seeing that Leave is now moving further into the lead with 144,000 votes in favour. So AAF, perhaps your wish will be granted this evening.
Yes, I hope so.
On campaign engagement, I appreciate you're going to be ever so slightly biased here, but which campaign do you think had better engagement with the voters?
It was very close, I think. I think maybe Remain might have slightly pushed forward in that regard.
I see. And do you think that the fragmentation of the Remain campaign hurt or assisted them?
I think it hurted them, definitely, and with one of the main campaigners being expelled from the campaign and that ruining the campaign definitely did have an impact on the campaign, yes.
Okay, and this is a question to either of you in the studio this evening, so you could please feel free to come in. Earlier we heard some discussion about the role parties play in this. Can you see this being partisan, or do you think this will be a purely non-partisan issue? And how should parties react if they find that the constituencies they represent have gone against them?
Well, I don't think it's really a partisan issue. I mean, we've seen cross-spectrum support for either side. We have communists and Tories supporting Leave. Even the Tory party itself, some people are supporting Remain. So it's really difficult to pin it on a partisan issue. I think it's much more broader than that, and it really would do a disservice to say it's a partisan issue.
Yes, I don't think it's partisan either, especially with classical liberals. Dunks, the leader, wants Remain, but many of the party members do not. And I think the Greens, they have a small minority, just like us, that wish to leave.
And where do you see party positions going after this? Depending on the results, of course, with either Leave or Remain, or perhaps even both.
I think that some of the more left-wing parties like Labour might not respect the result in this case. And the Greens might not as well. It's all very iffy at the moment.
Okay, if I could come in, because we have another constituency returning. Nottinghamshire has voted to leave, continuing the sort of blue stripe we see in the east of England. We're seeing that Nottinghamshire has voted to leave, and this has put the Leave campaign slightly further in the lead, although still only at 186,000 in the lead, so this could well be turned around in a flash, as we've seen so far.
This is just to clarify, this is the Prime Minister's constituency. So,
oh dear.
Well,
very
yes,
exciting.
We were expecting this to be Leave, but I don't think we were expecting it to be that close of a margin.
Yes, and also quite low turnout of 54%. Do you think that in some degree this could be a reflection on the Prime Minister?
Perhaps the Prime Minister hasn't done his homework properly.
Well, in all fairness, the Prime Minister was quite keen to stay out of the campaign directly, so perhaps that could be a part of it.
Possibly. So lost my train of thought there. So we are definitely seeing big
we are definitely seeing a swing towards Leave, is I think the words that you're trying to summon forth there.
Yeah.
Yes, that, and we're also seeing a sort of Middle England areas voting to Leave.
Yeah, and how do you see that as squaring? Because we can see, of course, a lot of the east of England seems to be voting to Leave, but what we've seen of sort of the West Midlands is less keenly in favour of Leave, seeing all of the ones we've seen so far around Manchester being Remain. How do you see that as squaring? Anyone at all?
Well, what was the question? I lost it.
Any more for any more?
Well, I don't think it matters now because we've just had another result coming in.
Ooh, exciting.
Cheshire has declared as a Remain win in a tight vote with a Remain in favour 52.82%. This has put somewhat of a dent in the Leave lead, dropping down from 185k to 157k. But still, Leave remains
not
in the
too bad
lead.
still.
Perhaps Leave remains isn't the best choice of words there.
Definitely not.
Oh man.
So I wonder, Cheshire is I mean, it's quite similar to other constituencies such as Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, Leicestershire. Voted Remain, where all the other counties have voted to Leave.
That is a good question.
It is very.
So I'm just gonna bring. I want to say thank you to you, Cub, for joining us. And I'm now gonna bring in Ben, who we should be able to hear. Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Good evening, sir. Now, perhaps I could get your reaction on this result coming in. Black Country has voted to Leave. This has pushed Leave considerably further into the lead with a vote majority of 394,000. And perhaps I could have your thoughts on that.
That's a big margin for Leave in the Black Country. I don't think it's any great surprise that the Black Country's gone Leave. And I don't think it bodes well, however, the results in the Midlands for us on the Remain side. You know, you were talking about earlier on the Midlands being the battlegrounds. Now, we've not had many of the West Midlands. It's mostly been the East Midlands. But so far, it's not going well. And if Remain wants to win, I think we have to run up the numbers in the devolved areas. Because when that Glamorgan and Gwent, that large victory in Glamorgan and Gwent came in, that closed the gap. And we need numbers like that in Wales and Scotland. And we need to not lose any more London constituencies, because those are seats we need to win in order to win this referendum.
Yeah, I agree. London is a very important battleground in here, especially with its high population. That's very important to the campaign.
And I definitely wasn't expecting East London to go Leave. That's not a good sign for Remain.
I'll bring up a point I had earlier, which is that considering central London's political differences with the rest of London, and indeed the presence of communism there, do you see that central London could buck the trend and go for Leave?
I hope not. It's entirely possible because, you know, the Rise campaign and the Militant Workers Front, they've really been pushing it in central London. I know that they've got a good base there, so it could be really if Remain loses central London, that could bode very badly because there's a lot of voters there and really we need to be running up the numbers in places like London, where we spent a lot of time campaigning.
Well, perhaps you might run up the numbers in West Yorkshire, which we're about to go to the results for. Oh dear, no you haven't. 68% in favour on West Yorkshire of leaving the single market. This has helped to top up the Leave lead at 561,000. So just a bit over 500,000 there. So we're seeing now that Leave is seriously taking the lead. This is the highest point that Leave has had so far.
Very exciting.
Very worrying for me.
So as I was going to bring up a point, but I've completely lost it now.
We all lose your train of thought sometimes, don't we?
If it makes you feel any better, I think I'm losing it as well.
Well, here's a question. Now, with the sort of very broad range of ideologies supporting remaining, for example, we see Dunks 11, who describes himself as a classical liberal, and the militant workers arguing for the same thing. Do you think that this kind of broad spectrum argument to remain will be beneficial or detractable in comparison to the Leave campaign, which of course has, I believe, one left-winger in it, and the remainder being right-wingers?
I think, in theory, it's massively beneficial because it allows us to reach out to a greater number of voters with a whole lot of different specific arguments. Classical liberals have completely different reasons for wanting to stay in from those in the Labour Party. However, in practice, I don't know how well that is working. The numbers coming in don't seem to be showing that having paid off.
And do you risk having a defocused message because you've got communists and you've got classical liberals arguing for the same thing? Would that not risk defocusing the logic behind why you want to remain?
Possibly, but at the same time, there's a whole wide range of arguments for remaining. You know, the single market has a vast range of benefits, and I think that having these people on diverging ends of the political spectrum allowed us to capture the full range of arguments and reach out to a whole range of different people with a whole range of different focuses that, you know, if it was just Labour and the Lib Dems running the in campaign, then it would only reach that particular audience, whereas we can broaden that message.
I see. And politically, if we find that it turns into a Leave result, how does that play for the parties that supported Remain?
Well, it's going to be gutting, first of all, and then it will just be a case of you know, the specific margins. It'll be interesting to see how the specific constituencies go and what sort of an awkward position that puts the party on the losing side in, and whether they're going to have different views to that of the constituencies they hold.
Okay, well, perhaps we could see what the people of Lothian and Fife think. Lothian and Fife have voted to remain. We are seeing the second return within Scotland. Lothian and Fife showing 72% in favour of Remain. This has put a dent into the Leave lead we were seeing before. The Leave lead has dropped from 561,000 to 233,000. We're seeing a closing of the gap here. So do you think this could perhaps be a turning point?
Those are the sorts of numbers we need in Scotland and other devolved areas.
I find this worrying, but I'm also optimistic, so I guess you could say I'm optimistically worried.
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, Will Shakespeare, what do you think would be the result if Scotland as a whole votes to remain and the rest of the UK votes to leave?
Well, that would be a difficult one. That would be, you know, almost full-blown constitutional crisis there. I personally would, you know, I don't think that's a good enough reason to break up the UK. We are a united kingdom, and if as a united kingdom we vote to leave, overall, then we have to accept that. And the people of Scotland might have a different view to the people of England, but we are one United Kingdom. I'm a unionist, and I don't think that's a good enough reason to
Okay,
break
and very
up the
quickly,
country.
because we do need to go to results, but with nationalists and unionists in a coalition for the Scottish Government, does this make the Scottish Government untenable if such a situation comes out?
No, I don't think so. It's not really an issue within the Scottish Government.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there, I'm afraid.
That's all right, that's
our
fine.
next result is Norfolk and Suffolk, which has voted to leave. Norfolk and Suffolk has pushed up the leave vote share to higher than it was even before it dropped down from the previous result at 573,000.
Very exciting for us, and is this the highest we've had for now?
I believe so. I'm going to ask the researchers to check. We've got a couple of interns who are paid in coffee, and they'll find out for us. Okay, they've crunched the numbers, and yes, it is. This is the highest point that Leave has reached so far.
Very exciting.
Not exactly a massive surprise, that part of the country.
I see. And if you look at the constituencies that haven't returned, can you see that being a swing back? Because if we look at the constituencies that have returned, there have been quite a few that have voted Leave, and a lot of them have been clumped in a similar kind of area. So we're seeing the East Midlands, East of England, but very, very early to return there. And with of course blobs in Wales and Manchester, and of course in London and a bit in Scotland. So can you see perhaps Remain's moment coming later when a swing back occurs with constituencies that haven't returned?
If turnout is strong in those constituents that haven't returned and are going to go Remain, then yes, if we can get the numbers up turnout wise in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, and also in the remaining London constituencies, and they stick with Remain, then potentially yes.
Okay, well perhaps we could see what Oxfordshire and Berkshire says. Oxfordshire and Berkshire has voted to Remain with a 56% in favour. This has put some further damage to the Leave lead at 464,000, dropping down from 573k.
Not very surprising. Loads of students there who come from other countries, especially the Commonwealth and the European Union itself, so not very surprising.
Yeah,
We've also seen a lot of very active campaigning from Contraband and Elliot 6, who has been very, very active at campaigning in their home constituency.
That we have indeed. Now, if I can ask you, Will Shakespeare, unless there's been a very sudden defection, I believe you're still part of Labour.
Yes, yeah.
Good. I like to check first.
just for now.
Oh dear! Don't run off on me midstream. I'll look very silly. Now, if Labour doesn't get the result it was hoping for this evening, where does the party go from there? Does it adapt its messaging, or does it double down?
That is a very good question. I don't know is the answer.
Okay, what would you do?
What would I do? Well, I think we have to respect the result of the referendum. And I think the focus would have to be on where we go going forwards, to make sure that leaving works for the people that being in the single market works for, to ensure that nobody loses out as a result of this decision. As much as I would love to Remain, if that is the result, that the result is to leave, then we have to make the best of that situation.
But if there's a vote to leave, then how can you implement a policy that you don't believe in?
I don't think it's so much about I mean, we can have that view, and we can, argue for it. And if the people have a different view, then we have to go with that. We can adapt, and we can accept that is now the course we're going to take on. And we've got to be optimistic.
Of course, yeah.
I see. Well, I'm sorry, AIF. Could I just interrupt you there, because we have our next constituency returning, Lanarkshire and the Borders, the third Scottish constituency, and again showing Scotland in a Remain position, with all of the constituencies in Scotland so far voting to remain. This one a narrower, showing at 33.89%. This is a Conservative held seat, which is worth noting specifically. The Conservatives, of course, supporting leaving. But it appears that the Lanarkshire and the Borders has said no. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, AIF.
Well, it's not very surprising. I have predicted that the devolved regions shall go for the main side. Problem is MG gonna freak out about this? We don't know. He seems to be a very volatile man. I'm not sure about this.
Does this, let's say hypothetically that the remaining Scottish constituency of Highlands and Islands votes to remain as well. Does that make the position of the Scottish Conservatives more difficult?
Possibly, but we will have to respect the result either way. Even so, us Conservatives will respect the result if it does go to remain. And vice versa, of course. And I call on other parties to accept the result, even if you campaigned against the result you got.
Well, perhaps I could come in because we now have a result from Dunks's constituency, Cumbria and Lancashire North, which of course has been the receiver of extremely heavy campaigning from the man himself. And he has been rewarded with Cumbria and Lancashire voting to remain at 77%. So I imagine Dunks will be feeling very proud of himself right now.
Of course he will be. And not surprising.
The culture of Dunks remains strong in Cumbria.
Praise the Dun.
That's a result we needed. If we'd lost Cumbria, then that would have been game over, I think, given the amount that we campaigned there.
Yes, this has of course been a serious break for Leave, for Remain, even the other one. The Leave majority was 404,000. It is now dropped to 127,000. So this is a serious break from the Leave majority. So perhaps this could be the point at which the fabled swingback occurs, if it does.
Massive congratulations to Dunks for that. You know, that massive turnout and that very strong result was his work. He put a lot of work into that, and he's delivered us quite a bit of hope at this late stage.
Well,
however, do you also remember that Cumbria, it has a very, very low population compared to some of the other places?
No, that is true.
Yes.
But it certainly helped to narrow the gap.
Well, perhaps if we go slightly south, we'll now be able to see the results for Lancashire South. Lancashire South has also voted to remain, although with a much less strong showing at 53%. This has further pushed down the Leave majority. Leave is now at 98,000 ahead. So this has weakened the Leave position considerably.
That's a very impressive result because we weren't expecting Lancashire South to be a Remain constituency. It should have been one of the Leave strongholds, but I guess the campaigning that we've seen in the northwest, as shown here, been incredibly successful.
I think this might have been a result of the last-minute push from the Remain side. Congratulations for you holding Lancashire South.
Thank you.
For Remain.
So do you see this, AIF, as, with this being a somewhat unexpected result, do you see this as perhaps a swingback against the Leave showing so far?
I still hope that Leave will win, and I still think that it will win, but this is slightly worrying in my case.
And while we have you, AIF, since as I last checked, you're a Conservative. Yeah.
Yes.
If it turns out that it's a Remain result, does this make the Prime Minister's position untenable?
I'm not sure. I'm definitely not sure. The Prime Minister may wish to do whatever, in whatever result. I don't know what the Prime Minister is going to do in case of a Remain win. I definitely don't know.
But in practical
So,
terms, does it make it more
I-
difficult?
It does sort of make it more difficult, but it does not, in realistic terms, make it more difficult.
Okay.
He still can govern, and he still can respect the result.
I believe in that's he needs to consider his position.
Yes, if I
So
could come in, I'm sorry, Brolo, but we've just had a return for Essex. Essex has voted to leave the single market, 70% in favour of leaving. This has increased the leave majority. It's gone up now from 98,000 to 376,000.
Good, in my eyes. Well, is that all of East Anglia declared?
I believe so, yes.
Oh, wow. Well, good luck on you. Well, thank you, East Anglia, for voting leave.
So anyway, I'm going to say thank you to A for joining us in the programme, and we're now going to bring in Unexpected Hippo.
Good evening, Unexpected Hippo. Thank you for joining us in the studio this evening.
Good evening.
I wonder what your thoughts are so far.
Very pleased with how the night's gone so far. A lovely result in my own constituency of 78% in favour of leave. I think I haven't checked all the results, but results of the whole night. I think it's a firm declaration, at least in my area, of our intent to unlock Britain from the single market trap.
Well, as marketing jingles aside, how do you see the relative volatility of the majorities, with it swinging back and forth from Leave and Remain quite rapidly?
Well, I think from the outset of the campaign, it's been clear that it's going to be a close result. I think we all could predict that. That's the only thing we could predict, really. But I'm quietly confident that with all the swinging about to and fro, I think we've done enough. I know my campaign was working very hard to get the result that we all want. Well, on my side, anyway.
I see. Well, let's see if you've got the result you'd like next from South Yorkshire. South Yorkshire has voted to leave at 66% in favour. This has pushed Leave firmly further into the lead at 552,000 in favour.
South Yorkshire, as we know, is the home to Inferno Plato, and I think this is the only time in history that Inferno Plato has actually had a success in his own constituency.
Yes, Inferno Plato does have somewhat of a difficulty with these kind of votes, doesn't he? But he keeps trying, and bless him for that. We're rooting for you in a non-partisan way because the BBC cannot show bias except when we do. Those are special cases. The rules are bendy. They're as flexible as the vote majority this evening. In fact.
Wow. Yeah, that's right. That's
awful.
Accurate.
Your license fees go to fund these puns.
I'm sure you can definitely count that as a pun, a joke maybe. Well, a very loose, depends on whether you define the joke as being funny or not. But yeah, again,
a very flexible joke, one could say. That would be a pun.
There we go. We got one eventually.
I just to go back onto the topic for a second. I can't help but feel that we're starting to see a bit of an east-west split.
Absolutely.
Looking at the map so far.
Yeah, there is certainly. It almost looks like we've got a sort of partition forming down the middle of England.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've still got quite a few Western results to come in. Upper Severn, Wiltshire and Gloucestershire, Wales, that other Welsh constituency. We've got a lot of seats still to come in on the west, but certainly the east is a big block of blue, and what we've got so far on the west is.
Well, perhaps I could distract you for a moment, because we were talking earlier about the political differences of central London, and we're now going to find out how that's played out. And we see central London with an extremely close vote of 50.27% has voted to leave. This is possibly the closest constituency we've seen this evening.
Now that is exciting. That is very good news.
Extremely close.
That is tight.
expletives are being used in the Remain camp right now.
I can imagine.
This is something that should have been very firmly Remain. I think there's quite a few people in the MBC studio who would like to use expletives right now, but of course we can't because we're on there.
Yes, there's a very interesting point, of course, is that this perhaps shows that the militant workers have managed to resonate with, despite arguing for the same thing that the broad right are arguing for here. And that it is, of course, a very narrow vote here. This is very close. But it has, nonetheless, determined a Central London Leave victory.
I think this is an example of how the the Leave campaign has appealed to not just the blue-collar workers and to, manual workers, the working class who traditionally would have voted for Brexit, but also to those in higher income groups, the ABC1 groups. And it's really, I think, proving the strength of the Leave campaign to really open the eyes of everyone in the country about the prospects post single market.
Well, let's see what Birmingham, Solihull, and Coventry think that. They think it's time to leave. 67% in favour of leaving in Birmingham, Solihull, and Coventry. We are seeing that Leave is being pushed further into the lead, coming up very close to the peak we've seen so far. Currently, the Leave vote stands at 556k, with the highest total we've seen so far at 561k.
I think it's still too early to call, but I think the Remain campaign right now, because those last two declarations are ones that definitely have been needing to remain Central London quite strongly, and Birmingham perhaps narrowly, but it should have been voting Remain if they wanted to have hope.
Yeah, it doesn't bode well for us.
Yes. Where do you see, Rollo, as sort of the key constituencies that have really been so far, and perhaps even to the result, bellwethers for where we're going this evening?
I think I know it's convenient just to say the last two, but really the last two constituencies, Central London should be firmly Remain. The whole argument of needing access to financial markets for the City of London, and then Central London votes to leave. I mean, that's quite a. And then Birmingham, with its well, I mean, it's although it is surrounded by Leave Heartland, it is as you can see, a very young constituency with traffic. So this is something which the Remain camp surely must have been hoping would go the other way.
Yeah.
So I just Will Shakespeare for joining us in the studio.
Thank you very much for having me.
Very good evening. And as you leave, we shall return a further result. If we move slightly west of the place we've been talking about, we can look at West London. West London has voted to remain in the single market. This has put somewhat of damage to the Leave majority, which has dropped from 787 to 684. So around 100,000 drop there, but still with Leave in the lead. And we are joined in the studio by the MHoC. Good evening.
Good evening.
What are your thoughts so far this evening?
I believe it's very close. I believe it is not over yet, but it's going very back and forth, and it's anybody's game.
Okay, and to aim at someone who's completely on the different side of the partisan line to the person I last asked this question to, if it turns out that there is a Remain victory this evening, does it make Dr. Caesar MD's position untenable?
Can you repeat that question?
If there is a Remain victory, does it make the Prime Minister's position untenable?
If there's a Remain victory,
yes.
I believe that the Prime Minister would have no mandate to leave the European Union and would have no mandate to leave the single market. I believe that remaining in the single market is very equivalent to remaining in the European Union, and I believe that but I don't believe you will do this, but I believe it is right for us to stay in both.
Okay, if I can come in, we have just had we've just had a.
Sorry, go ahead.
We've just had a return in Northumbria. Northumbria has voted to leave at 76% in favour. It's a very strong showing in Northumbria, and it has seriously harmed the hopes for the Remain camp to perhaps claw back, because we've seen that they've dropped their hopes, because the Leave majority has gone from 684,000 to 960,000, just shy of 1 million in favour so far. Of course, however, there are still plenty of constituencies to return, so it is possible that, of course, it could still go Remain's way. This is by no means a foregone conclusion.
I think on the issue of the Prime Minister's position, I also think if it does go to a Leave way, the credibility of the Labour Party, of the Liberal Democrats, of the parties in favour of remaining in the single market coming up to the general election have to be severely in doubt, and whether voters will really party who goes against the wishes of this referendum, if indeed we see a Leave vote, or be a party that can so quickly change tack and become in favour of leaving the single market.
Well, I'm just
hearing on the Twitter grapevine rumours that the Prime Minister in Conservative Party headquarters is shouting along the vein of "I'm not going anywhere." Why on earth is my position in question again?
Well, it appears we're keeping Dr. Caesar MD.
Expletive.
Oh no, he can't say that. He can't say naughty words on air. Oh, don't let him in. If he comes to Broadcasting House, lock him out. Give him a bottle of sherry and tell him to go away.
Brilliant. So I'm just going to bring in an extra guest. We're going to have 3 guests on at the moment.
It's getting a bit crowded in here, isn't it?
Lannister, from the northeast. Hello.
Hello.
Lannister, how do you feel about Northumbria? And, of course, Tyne and Weir, which we saw as a very early return.
I think that the North-East vote for Leave is very surprising. We were expecting a Remain victory there. And the sheer ratio of Leave to Remain votes is quite shocking to me, especially as I am a candidate in Tyne and Weir.
Well, yes. Now, if I could come in, we have a further result. And that is that North Yorkshire has voted to leave the single market. We're seeing a real blue belt here on the east side of England. And this is a Leave vote of 70%. And this means that North Yorkshire has officially shoved the Leave majority over 1 million votes at 1,174,544 votes in favour of Leave.
The results are becoming incredibly localized. I can't see any eastern constituency that voted Remain, unfortunately, except for London. Of course, the southeast is still largely uncounted.
Do you think the southeast could be a comeback point? Because, of course, this isn't a foregone conclusion. You know, that 1 million vote majority can vanish.
I believe the southeast is very. It could be very open to business. I'm hopeful that they will do what's right for the United Kingdom economy and vote for Remain, but we'll have to see.
Okay, well, perhaps we could see what the people of Shropshire and Staffordshire think is best for the UK. And they say it's best to leave. Shropshire and Staffordshire have voted to leave. And we're seeing that perhaps the belt of Remain we've seen on the west side of perhaps northwest has been cut into here. It's a very pretty pattern, isn't it?
I think what we're seeing here is a very clear failure of the Remain campaign. to engage its more liberal middle class voters, especially in areas of the South and the Midlands. I think that a lot of seats could potentially be won there, and campaigning could have been diverted there from the devolved seats, which, as we have seen, are voting for Remain quite
Well,
strongly.
you say that it's been a lack of engagement with the middle classes, but we see that North London and Cumbria, for example, we've got, in fact, particularly in London, where we've seen 3 constituencies go for leaving, and then Central London very narrowly scraping a leave vote there. Is London the exception that proves the rule?
I must say that I was very surprised at I was expecting a much larger volume of people in London to vote for Remain. What we've been seeing here are margins of mainly around 60%, whereas in some of the more main Leave seats, we've been seeing votes of 76% in Northumbria, for example. I think that Central London, the fact that Central London voted Leave, even though very slightly, still baffles me slightly. And I think that this is a failure to divert campaign resources effectively.
And I think interesting to note the Central London, the sort of demographic there. It's a very diverse constituency, on gender, on ethnic minorities, on sort of income even.
Well, that's an interesting point. I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you there because we have our next result coming in. South East London has voted to remain. This means that in total, 4 out of 6 of the London constituencies have voted to remain. Now, here's a question. Here's a question for you all. Now, we've seen the Mayor of London and MP for Northumbria, Real Bevan. He's got the vote he wanted in Northumbria, and he hasn't got it in London as a whole. So, which side does he pick?
Hopefully, he'll pick the side that's right for London, which is to advocate to remain in the single market.
Well, partisanship aside, there for
campaigns. Partisanship aside, London is the center for the financial industry. London is the center for the trading industry. London is the epicenter of the United Kingdom's connection to the broader world.
He is also
and our connection to the broader world, in a lot of ways, relies on our connection to Europe. He should do what's right for London and what the London voters decided, and he should to remain.
I agree that he should advocate to remain because of the simple turnout for the vote of his the people under his assembly. However, I do not think this is necessarily what he will do, as I think there was a much larger swing towards Leave in London than expected. And so
I'm very sorry, but I'm going to have to come in now because our next constituency is Surrey, which has voted to leave at 76%. This is a very, very strong showing in Surrey. And we're seeing that the Leave lead is now at 1,753,606 votes.
I think on the issue of London, I think it's key to realise that obviously the United Kingdom has to act as a whole. We can't have parts of the country remaining, especially not London or just a city, remaining in the single market. If, as it looks at the moment, tentatively, touch wood, that we are leaving the single market, then there is no question really. London has to leave with the United Kingdom. And to say that London is the centre of our trading to the world, yes, that's very true. And that is something that will continue outside of the single market. We can look across to the BRIC countries, to America, to developing nations across the world, and London can be the centre point of that. But also the Conservative Party recognises that there is a world beyond London. Manchester, Birmingham, new developing cities across the country, the northern powerhouse, the Midlands engine, all something we want to recognise in our post single market strategy.
Looking outside.
Sorry, it is interesting how areas where their economy is more service based are voting Remain, whereas areas where there's still manufacturing are voting to leave.
I think that might be simply to do with your classic conservative liberal divide between the more working and lower middle and the sort of middle and upper middle classes. We are seeing a lot of middle class seats outside of the Midlands, especially in London and in the southern part, in the some of the parts of Lancashire, voting Remain, and the manufacturing seats voting Leave.
Okay, well, perhaps I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt here. Perhaps we could see what Hampshire South has to say. Hampshire South has voted to leave. We're seeing a 73% in favour. This has pushed the Leave majority, which has almost reached 2 million now, at 1,985,348 votes.
Well, it's looking. It's getting closer and closer to a Leave vote now, isn't it? I think only really. We've still got some big blocks to declare: Northern Ireland, a lot of Wales, the South East, Scotland. But pressing for the Leave campaign right now.
If it turns out to have this kind of number, let's say there were no more votes now, and that was it. How tenable would be the position to parties who say, "Look, we want to remain in. This is, we're very keen on remaining in. We are not happy about leaving at all." How tenable does their position become?
Very party dependent on that. I think different groups will see the result differently. I think there will definitely be some parties, the Scottish Liberal Democrats, which I lead, that we will continue to advocate for Remain. But I know certain parties might decide to vote, support the broader majority. We'll just have to see.
I think that it is unsure as to whether parties would make a particular affiliation in continuing to campaign for Remain. But I think that because of the nature of the Lib Lab official opposition, that all of our parties and affiliates will come to some sort of an agreement and take a similar, if not the same position.
I see. Well, perhaps if I could just seven this conversation. We're going to go to the upper seven now. Oh, whoopsie-daisy, which has voted to leave the single market at 69%.
I believe that's the rest of the West Midlands.
Yes, this has pushed the Leave majority into the 2 million bracket. 2,202,112.
I think it's
parties respecting the referendum result. Just very quickly, I think it would be profoundly anti-democratic for them to fly in the face of the referendum results. But of course, that is up to the voters to decide at the next general election.
No matter what the result, no matter what the rest of the results will be, there will still be 10 million people who voted to Remain, and they will still need a voice in Parliament, in government, in possibly government. They will need a voice for their positions. If in other issues, if the United Kingdom voted to, let's say, the United Kingdom voted to stop subsidies for climate change initiatives, I know a lot of parties would not change their opinions on that. This is no different.
But the point of having these referendums is to put the decision into the hands of the ordinary people, and that's exactly what we've done. And if they return a verdict,
I think we may have lost him there.
So, in case it hasn't already been clear to some of our listeners, currently had 42 out of 50, 51 constituencies declare. I think it's fairly safe to say that Leave has won.
Well, no, that's not strictly true. It is still possible for Remain to win.
It's mathematically possible, but looking at the constituencies left to declare, I think it would be. We're expecting to leave the single market.
There's still a good chunk of the southwest. There's still my home constituency, Northern Scotland, Northern Ireland. I hope is very promising, and Northern Wales. But it's it's getting tougher. It's getting tougher, which is disappointing.
On
We'd
the
have,
issue,
we'd have to see a very dramatic change in Remain's fortunes. Sorry, I've just interrupted someone. Go on.
fine. On the issue of respecting the results of the referendum, I think that it is not always up to a single referendum to make a decision as major as this. And a decision made by a single referendum is not always the most reliable. I mean, even Abraham Lincoln was elected on the majority. It really
Well,
does
I mean, in all
depend.
fairness, there have been three referendums now in total of the EU, and now 2 have gone against the EU, 1 have gone in favour. So, just how many do they need? You know,
Exactly.
Is it best of 7? Best of 9? Best of 51?
Your eyes.
But each on different issues. Well, or varying issues to a degree.
Do you believe? Are you advocating for a vote on the final terms of the Brexit deal? Like a public vote?
For a vote on the final terms of the Brexit deal. I think that the whole process needs to be as democratic as possible, and ensuring that turnout is as high as possible is a responsibility of the government as well.
I agree with Comrade Lannister.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there because we do have another result to declare. Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire has voted to leave. This is a showing of 69.3%. We're seeing that a lot of the Leave constituencies have quite high showings of, around the sort of 70s mark-ish. 70s, 75, that kind of number.
I think this really is displaying the failure of the the Remain campaign to engage more middle-class voters. I mean, the only seat that has, in the home counties, that have declared so far to vote Remain has been Oxfordshire and Berkshire, which is the Labour Deputy Leader's seat. So I think that really focusing of campaigning on seats that were already projected to vote Remain to spell the doom for our campaign.
Indeed, Comrade Lannister, there has been a message sent in to you from Brenda in Bristol, who has said to your proposal a further referendum. Another one? Oh no, there's too much politics now in this country. Brenda in Bristol will not be supporting your campaign, but let's see if North and Mid Wales will be, and of course Somerset and Bristol, who have returned very quickly with each other. So Somerset and Bristol has voted to leave, and we're seeing at 66%, and North and Mid Wales has voted to remain at 79%. So a very, very powerful showing there for North and Mid Wales.
I'm just gonna say, because I know that Unexpected Hippo and the No Heart have to go back to their respective campaigns, because I imagine there was a lot of a lot of alcohol being passed around. So I'm going to say thank you to them for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And then I'm just going to bring in Red Wolf, who is from North Wales. So can he hear us? Red Wolf, are you there?
Red Wolf, a very good evening to you, sir. Of course, we're seeing Wales, where you have had considerable focus, showing Remain overall, but we're seeing that the country as a whole is showing quite a Leave lead. And while it is, of course, possible for Remain to win this back, it's looking quite difficult, with Leave showing a lead of 2,239,190 votes. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Definitely a difficult evening. Obviously, I was going to hope for the opposite result. I think the Remain campaign put up a hard fight. I myself campaigned a lot in my constituency and in my hometown of Wrexham. And I think that I'm very glad to see that the people that I was out there speaking to and talking about the issues with, they they thought that I had a good message. They liked my ideas, and they voted what I think is the correct way, which was to remain in the single market. I think a lot of people tonight have, but obviously we're seeing the opposite result from what I was hoping for. So that's a tough pill to swallow, but we're gonna have to just make do with this.
Red Wolf,
What does this...
Oh, go on, India.
Sorry. Oh, what... India. What does this suggest for politics in Wales now? Both constituencies and overall have voted to remain, and it looks like England is going to vote to leave, and it looks like Northern Ireland are going to vote to remain too. Where does Wales go from here?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm the leader, or the de facto Welsh leader of the Welsh Classical Liberals, and I would say we're obviously a staunchly unionist party. So I don't think this is going to change that position. We're going to try and make the best of this result, even if it's not what we wanted, and we're not going to look to independence at all.
Well, perhaps we could see what Highland and Grampian have to say. Highland and Grampian have voted to remain. This means that Scotland as a whole has gone Remain this evening. The Remain vote in Highlands and Grampian at 66.48%, meaning that in total, while this has taken a hit to the Leave vote, the Leave majority is still quite high at 2,239,190. So, Red Wolf, your party has made no secret of its opposition to this referendum. If, as it looks like it may, the referendum goes against your party position and a Leave vote is done, then how do the Classical Liberals react?
Well, I think Dunks has said the same thing over and over again, is that we all believe that the best choice is to remain in the single market, and I don't think that we have to change that position at all. If the people of the United Kingdom or our constituencies, if they really want to leave the single market, then they can vote for a different party, because we're a representative democracy. This is what our party stands for, and if they don't want that, they can vote for a different party.
It is interesting to suggest, I have heard some suggestions that instead of another referendum, perhaps having a general election specifically to elect MPs to decide on the final Brexit deal. Comrade Lannister, did you have any thoughts on that?
I think it could certainly be an interesting idea, and I think that it would be the optimal solution for a people's Brexit. However, I think that it all depends on the government's capability to deal with financing these votes and to deal with having perhaps several separate assemblies operating at the same time.
Okay, those are some interesting points. Now we're going to go to our next constituency of the evening. Sussex has voted to leave the single market at 61.76%. We're seeing that the Leave majority is now somewhat recovered from a hit it took. During Highland and Grampian, it dropped below 2 million. It's now back above 2 million at 2,128,891.
And now we have in the studio, what's up, 008, who is...
the Sussex Saviour herself. Good evening, what's up?
Of course, Sussex election. Hello.
I presume that you're disappointed with this result in Sussex.
Oh, very, very, very disappointed. Especially when I was out there during the general election, giving my bit, getting pumped up, giving it a real go on my bus across Sussex to the Green Party, and this is kind of how the people feel now.
Well, now we're going to go to an area that is also I understand of interest to you, which is Northern Ireland.
Oh,
Northern Ireland has voted to remain at 67.18%. Perhaps not a greatly surprising result.
That's right, grand. That is.
What's up? If I may ask you, as a representative in Stormont, Where if we find out that the votes pan out, and it is of course possible, although quite unlikely, that Remain could swing back from here, then if however we assume that it's a Leave vote overall, then where does your first loyalty go? Does it go to Northern Ireland and their Remain vote, or does it go to the United Kingdom as a whole?
Well, Northern Ireland is a special case in the United Kingdom because it shares a land border with the Republic of Ireland, and it has its own problems and its own issues that affect it with regards to its European status.
I see.
I believe that my first duty is to my constituents in Northern Ireland before the rest of the United Kingdom, because they're the people that are going to be affected, and they're the people who want to stay.
I see. And if your Labour partners as a whole decide to, let's say that there was a bill to give Parliament's assent to leaving the single market, and your Labour partners had whipped in favour of voting to leave, assuming a Leave vote, would you break the whip on that?
Well, I don't vote in the Commons, so I couldn't answer that question.
Okay. What about in Stormont, if there was a similar ascension there?
But there wouldn't be a whip set because I am the leader of the SDLP, so...
Ah, so you have all of the power.
In Northern Ireland, I am afraid, yes.
Right, well, Gloucestershire and Wiltshire, perhaps we'll see in one of the last constituencies a result that will please you. Oh dear, no we haven't. We've seen a Leave victory. It is now mathematically impossible for Remain to clinch this. The remaining undeclared constituencies have a lower total population than the potential votes needed to top up onto the Remain side. So we can at this time at 8:48 confirm that the British people have spoken and they've said we are out. What's up, 008? What happens now?
Well, I'm personally going to go off and cry. Everyone else can feel free to do whatever pleases them before we enter total economic oblivion, to be honest.
Well, I'm sure it won't be that bad. Now, Red Wolf, you've been fairly silent for a while. Do you have any comment here?
Yeah, it's just definitely, as I said, it's a disappointment. I am looking forward to seeing the exact totals of the vote tonight. You know, I know obviously we've lost. I want to see by how much, but as I said, definitely not too happy with these results.
Okay, one final question before we let you go, Red Wolf. Do you see, because you focus on Wales, do you see the fact that Wales has in both of its constituencies voted to remain as a mandate for you're continuing to argue for membership of the single market, or do you see the greater vote of the country to leave as a mandate against that?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat the question? I didn't quite catch that.
Okay, Wales as a whole has voted to remain. The United Kingdom as a whole has voted to leave. Which of these do you see as a mandate for you to act specifically?
I would definitely say Wales. We are a representative democracy.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there because we do need to bring in our next constituency. So I want a quick fire question there. But thank you very much for joining us this evening, Red Wolf.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, we have now seen Cornwall and Devon has voted to remain at 57%. Rick Cool no doubt quite pleased his constituency has gone in his favour. We have seen a bit of a cutting of the Leave mandate there, but it is mathematically impossible for Remain to win now.
We are now joined in the studio by Toastin Russian, who has the privilege of having the final constituency to declare, which will be Kent.
Welcome back.
But
hello, I'm very excited.
What do we make of Cornwall and Devon?
It's interesting. It is. It does, because we've got this nice little yellow line along the west, which is pretty interesting. You have to wonder why. Well, wonder why Cornwall and Devon did that.
You can
Probably
you can sort of see a sort of lobster claw forming around London, can't you? It's sort of going dang, dang.
Jesus, I don't think Mr. Dimble would be too proud of his new kind of replacement
That's
after
very
his
cheeky.
retirement.
That's very cheeky. You can't say things
No,
like
I'm
that
sorry,
on air.
I've
That's
been-
very naughty, Toast.
I've been cheeky. I apologise, but no, it's Kent coming up, and I'm very excited.
Well,
And if
you
Frizz-
prepare to be excited because we are about to have the final constituency of the evening returning. Kent has voted to leave 75.83%. This means we can reveal the final total for the United Kingdom. As a whole, we have voted to leave with 15,833,736 in favour of leave and 13,540,991 in favour of remain. This gives leave a comfortable majority of 2.3 million.
Wow, that's fantastic, isn't it? That's awesome.
At the beginning of the evening, we asked would the campaign give Dr. Caesar MD the kind of mandate he was hoping for. I think it would be very hard to say that hasn't happened this evening. His gamble has paid off.
He's got the mandate. He's got the support of the Leave camp. He's got the support of the government, the party, family and friends. It's gonna be a positive looking more like rest of the term.
So
Fantastic.
What happens now? What is in the short term the path now for the country?
I would say Article 50 will come out maybe in a couple of weeks, and then after that, I would say we'll see a budget, and then I can't really say for sure. Major decisions. That's pretty much major decisions made. It depends how budget talks go, and I'm not in budget talks, so I can't possibly comment.
Okay, we are going to get very packed in the studio right now because we are joined. I'm going to have to budge up a bit to make room for people in here because we are being joined by Will Shakespeare again and Tench, the former classical liberal London MP, who may or may not be with us. We're not quite sure on how well the lines come through. Shakespeare, welcome back.
Thank you very much. I wish it was under better circumstances.
Where does Labour go now?
Before we start asking questions, I'm just going to scour just the Twitter grapevine. So we've got the classical Liberal leader, Dunks 11, will be his constituents, saying that his constituents has voted to remain, and his message is that he will not see tariffs imposed or immigration reduced against their will. We've got the First Minister of Scotland, MG 9500, saying back to Bute House, and he'll be giving a national address. We also see Twisted Nuke saying we have our country back, God bless Northumbria and the United Kingdom.
I couldn't possibly comment.
And then we also have rumoured in the pubs of London, we have comments from B13 saying, I'll respect the result in Greater Manchester as that's the people who I am working to better the lives of whilst in the Lords and hopefully as an MP next term. So he's suggesting try and keep the UK in the single market as that's what Greater Manchester voted for. So I think this is on to a fair point of is this a done thing? Is it settled that we are leaving the single market?
Yes. The question now is, of course, how quickly does the government proceed now that it's had the mandate it looks for? And to that, of course, we'll have to wait for the government to decide. But it is pretty clear that Dr. Caesar MD's gamble has paid off.
It's Jesus.
I think Toast and Rush is being attacked by dogs right now.
No, it's my dog. He doesn't like the.
He doesn't like Remainers.
He doesn't like Remainers or the washing machine.
Is the washing machine in favour of Remain or Leave? How do you think the washing machine vote has gone this evening?
Well, the washing machine's currently trying to leave its socket, so I'd say leave.
Well, that sounds like a hard exit to me.
That's
Very
fantastic. It is a
Trump issuing high tariffs on imported washing machines, so it looks like we may not be getting such a good trade deal for washing machines to the United States.
This is fantastic. It'll be interesting news, interesting days coming up for the government. I would say the government has the mandate at once, and with the leader of the official opposition's announcement of PMQs that he will be respecting the result, I'd say we'll be leaving the single market. This would be it's interesting. Interesting times.
Thank you everyone for tuning in to the mBBC's coverage of the single market referendum. I'm sure we'll probably be seeing each other again when the next general election comes around, and we shall see if the mandate for leaving is continued in that vote share. But I'd like to thank Indigo Rolo, former Common Speaker, for joining us this evening, and I would like to thank all of our guests for coming on. I'd especially like to thank Dunks11, who has put in absurd levels of work as ever to produce the fantastic graphics we've enjoyed this evening. So thank you very much to all here at Broadcasting House, and thank you to all those listening. Good night.